Howdy, friends. Thank you for listening to the Roundup Podcast. In this season of the podcast, you will hear breakout audio from Roundup 2024. If you have any questions related to the content, send them to sbtccollegiate@sbtexas.com. Don't forget, follow us on social media at sbtccollegiate. Now, enjoy the podcast.
All right. Well, cool. Well, guys, this is the breakout on leveraging adult leaders to make disciples. And so I'll introduce myself just real briefly, and then we can dive in. My name is Jonathan. I serve as the college pastor for 747 College Ministry in Jonesboro, Arkansas at Central Baptist Church. And so we've been doing that. I've been in that college ministry for 9 years now, been leading it for 6, about to start our 7th, I guess, this fall. And so this is my wife, Sarah, and we just celebrated our 6th-year anniversary last week. And then that's our little boy, Jack. He's 15 months, and he is the most energetic, happy little dude you have ever met. He's got the most contagious laugh. It's awesome. And so love him, love my family. What's cool about our college ministry, too, in my own life, other than just the fact that I've been able to lead it and be a part of it since its start, and this is our college ministry, by the way, is my wife and I actually met in our college ministry the first year that it started. And I was an intern, and she was a I was an intern and a student. Let me get that right so y'all don't think I was an intern hitting on students, all right? I was an intern my senior year, and she was a junior in college, so it was permissible. All right, and so I was in college still. Yeah, let me clarify that real fast so y'all don't get fired. And so then we just started dating, and we got married 18 months later. And so it's been awesome. Love this college ministry. It's just I told someone I'm 30, and so we're about to start our 10th year. Like, I have done this. I've had a part in this college ministry for a third of my life now, which is like really weird to think about, but like it really has been a major part of my life. And so just really grateful for it. But I'm excited to get to talk to you guys today about leveraging adult leaders to make disciples. And there's a lot of good things we're going to talk about. But first, there is a great debate in college ministry, I feel like, between should we be student-led or should we be adult-led? And some of you guys are shaking your heads because you know that. Like, I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and one guy honestly just like land-blasted adult-led ministries. And I was like, bro, you're in sin. No, I'm just kidding. Like I was like, man, like, I hate that he sees it that way. And I'm not here to advocate today for only adult-led ministry. You know, some people will say, well, you need student-led ministry because students are already doing life on life with students. Students know the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of their peers, and students just understand, they're in the sphere of influence already. And then you would have others on the other end of the spectrum saying, no, you need adults because there's greater maturity there. There's greater responsibility. They're not flaky like college students are. They'll actually do what they say they'll do, which I love. And then they have resources. College students are broke as a joke, right? And so they don't have money. They don't have food, resources, a house to host people in. And so they're meeting in cafeterias and lounges and just common spaces. And so you have this great debate. But what I want to propose to us today is the sweet spot being somewhere in the middle. Oftentimes that's true of life, whether it's politics, whether it's spending money and saying, hey, is it good to be a saver or spender? I'd say yes, right? Like it's true of a lot. And so today, maybe you've come in with a negative outlook on having adults in your ministry. I want to show you the beauty of it. Maybe you're already doing it and you just want to do it in a greater way. I hope there's some practical things you can take away. But there is beauty in having a dual-led ministry in terms of students and adults. We're not having near as fun as they are over there.
We can.
Yeah, we can. Come on, let's do it. And so I want to see you guys have a balanced approach, and so that's what we're going to do. I don't want you to die on one hill or the other. Both is where it's at. It's a both and, not an either or. And so for us, hello, come on in. For us, I want us to think biblically first. You know, we have a really bad problem as Westerners to think strategy and philosophy and like, this is what it should be, without really consulting with what God has said in His Word about it. And so I'm not going to preach to you guys except for this next little part. But I really want us to look at a biblical foundation first and foremost, because we need to hear what the Bible has to say about this. And the Bible has a lot to say about this, in fact. 3 examples. And this is not an exhaustive list, but 3 really prominent examples that we see. One is Jesus and His disciples. We know Jesus had how many men? 12, right? Now, He had many more. He had His 500, but He had His 12 that He really poured into. What we don't always talk about is the age difference between Jesus and the 12. Jesus was 30 years old when He started His public ministry, which is very common. But in the Jewish day, a young man would be a man by the ages of 13 to 15, and that 13 to 15-year-old would begin to learn under a rabbi and would walk with this rabbi and be their apprentice until they're able to go and be the master and to be the rabbi themselves. And so for Jesus with His disciples, He could have very likely had disciples as young as 13 years old. And you wonder why they were idiots, right? Like, I mean, that explains it. Like, think of any 13-year-old in your life. Like, you're like, yeah, I could see why Jesus would get upset with that person. And so, now listen, all of them weren't all that young. Most likely, Peter was one of the older ones. Could have been 20 to 25. Could have been even closer. But Jesus had a range of His disciples being anywhere from maybe 5 to 17 years older than His disciples. We don't always talk about that, but there's something there. Paul and Timothy, the same thing is true. Paul had maybe 20 to even upwards to 30 years on Timothy. And when Paul writes 2 Timothy, he is writing with his death in mind. And it is important for our faith to move laterally, but it is also important that our faith move down the line linearly. And so for Paul, he was saying, hey, I need to pass the faith down to someone, and Timothy is who I trust. He is someone that can do this, and he'll entrust it to faithful men. And last but not least, one of my favorite examples is Titus 2. And I want us to look at this text just for a second. Titus 2, Paul says, older men need to teach the younger men. Older women need to teach the younger women. And I love this word right here. He says, show yourself in all respects to be a model. Show yourself to be a model. And that's what discipleship is. And so adults know how to model discipleship really, really well to college students. And so, it's interesting because when Paul writes Titus, we could read Titus by the time we walk out of this room. I mean, if we spend the rest of this time reading Titus, we could probably read it 4 times before this breakout's over. Titus is such a short little book. And one of the few things that Paul says in this letter to Titus, who's planting a church at Crete, is that you need to do this right here. I mean, that is so important. And for Paul to pass on to Titus, and it's important for us today as well to know this and to grasp this. And I want us to focus on why, what, and then how this needs to happen. So why do these relationships need to exist? Why do these relationships need to exist? Number one, for students to learn to love the local church. Amen to that, right? Students need to learn to love the local church. The danger in a lot of college ministries, and I made this mistake, both hands are up here. I made this mistake early on in college ministry, is that our college ministry became kind of a hub and a silo in of itself in the local church. I mean, God was doing great things. We were growing, and everyone was like, oh man, the college ministry looks great. But no one really had a hand in it beside a hand-selected amount of adults. And so for so long, we really were a silo. And the danger for us is in college ministry is that we become a parachurch ministry inside the local church. I don't want you to hear me wrong. There's nothing wrong with parachurch ministries, but there is something wrong with a ministry isolated inside the local church. We're a body. What hand says to the leg, hey, you can't do that, right? Like, we're together in this thing, as we've talked about in a lot of spots. And so we want our students to love the local church. As much as these college students need these adults, I would argue that these adults need these college students as well. I have seen that time and time again. You know, students, adults need fun, and students give them that. Students need wisdom and responsibility and modeling, and adults can give them that. Adults may not be able to tell them all the famous or popular trends on TikTok, but they can teach them how to navigate life because they've been there. Adults need to be in the lives of college students. Students have a greater chance of connecting to the local church when they graduate if they have multiple adults in their life. I heard a stat one time, and this is for high schoolers coming out of high school, that if there are 5 adults in their life, the number was astronomical. It was like greater than 70%, that there's over 70% chance that they'll stay connected in the local church. And I can't help but think the same thing is true for college students leaving college ministry if they know multiple adults in their life. Secondly, students can receive greater or deeper discipleship. I like to use the analogy of a magnet, that if I have a magnet and I have something that's magnetic underneath it, that a magnet will pull it toward it, right? And it just kind of like comes to it. And so discipleship is like that. Discipleship is me pulling you to where I'm at in my walk with Jesus. And if this is Christ-likeness, I'm pulling you closer to Christ-likeness than where you were beforehand. And adults can do that. There is nothing wrong. We have 25-ish D group leaders who are students in our ministry. They are spiritual parents to other college students in our college ministry, and they can do it. But even those guys and girls tend to be a head above other college students spiritually, but adults are head and shoulders above the students. And so there's a deeper discipleship that exists with adults and college students. And with adults, there is now a greater pull and a greater maturity to Jesus Christ compared to students, even leading students in some ways. Thirdly, I would say students need to see the beauty of Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, 11 through 16 is one of my personal ministry philosophies, and it talks about equipping the saints for the work of ministry that Jesus gave to the church, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry. And what we need to learn as ministry leaders and practitioners is that our job is to equip the saints, not do everything for the saints. Some of us will die in ministry and burn out because we try to be everyone's hero. And there is not room for that because we have one hero, and his name's Jesus. And to borrow from Dave Ferguson says ministry leaders, pastors need to be hero makers, not heroes. And guys, that's what we are. We are hero makers. That there is no greater joy. Like what great parent would get their kid on the graduation stage and be like, I did that. They'd be like, what a punk, right? Like you'd be like, who cares? Like, who cares? No, you let that young man, you let that young girl celebrate in graduating or whatever achievement it is in life, even though you may know that you were a vital part in that. It is okay to not receive the credit and recognition in that moment. Right? We want to be hero makers. And this comes down to our identity as leaders. I wrestle with this. You wrestle with this. A lot of us probably wrestle with this. But we want our students to see the beauty of Ephesians 4. And we can only go so deep with our students. I mean, like I'll just be honest with you guys. I have a very low capacity to do life on life with a lot of people. Like, I am an introvert. Like, if I want to get relaxed and filled up again, you will find me at my hotel room just chilling, right? Like that is joyful for me. And so for me, like, I can only go so deep with so many people at a certain season of my life. And so when you multiply yourself and you equip the leaders to do that, you are now able to do that more and more and more. Don't try to be the hero. Try to be the hero maker. More adults discipling students means more impact over the long haul. And last but not least, we want to teach our students why we want to do this is for our students to learn to be everyday Christians. The majority of your students, I would even argue over 80%, over 90% maybe of your students are going to graduate and go on to be CEOs, businessmen and women, teachers, lawyers, doctors, engineers, the list goes on and on. You and I are not in those fields. We are in ministry, and I love it. But our students need to see everyday Christians, everyday normal Christians. And listen, you and I know we're normal. I could sit down right here and we could have a separate breakout on how we're a bunch of broken, fragile, messed up people. I mean, there could be a separate breakout on that right now. And whatever reason, students idolize us. They look at us and they're like, oh, they got it together. You know, they hear you preach a great sermon. Oh, he's a great husband. And then it's like, no, just talk to my wife, right? Like I yelled at her last night. I'm not a perfect leader, but they see us as that sometimes. And so putting these adults in their life helps them to just see the normality of Christianity, that the Great Commission has always gone forward, not through the extraordinary, but through the ordinary, and that this is possible. Regular, everyday church members helping them to make the Great Commission go forward through them. So students need to learn and see that it is great and it is possible and it is a wonderful thing to just be an everyday Christian. And one thing I also love is that we have also, with our discipleship, and I'll get into that more in a little bit, if we know so-and-so wants to be an accountant, we'll place them with an adult who disciples them who's an accountant. It's like match up those career choices, help them to start to see ethically what does it look like to manage someone's money that's not your own, right? And like, how do you do this well? And so we have done that. And then sometimes God has just overlapped those things, not because of us, but because of His goodness. And so that's been so fun as well. Next, I want to talk through what needs to exist in these relationships. In our ministry, we define discipleship as becoming a devoted follower of Jesus Christ who is becoming more like Jesus, meeting with mature believers, and multiplying one's life. And how that takes place is through three practices of sharing life, sharing the Word, and sharing ministry. If you want a great book on these things, but fleshed out in 8 practices, I just kind of categorized them more. I was reminded this morning even of Dr. Robert Coleman's Master Plan of Evangelism. Incredible book. It's one of the best sellers. And if you could just pick like 3 discipleship books, that would probably be, that needs to be in your group of 3. So check that book out. But to just talk through these things real quick, sharing our life. Adults need to share their life with these students. We learn through imitation and through modeling. Like Jack right now, because I have not been the best example. I had kind of bop him on the head playing with them, and now he is slapping everyone that he comes in contact with. And we're like, listen, buddy, you can't do that, but that's my fault. Because I taught him that. But even when he has begun to learn to talk, he's talking more right now. And we're like, say, ball. And he's like, bah. You know, and he's like getting there. He's saying those words because you learn through modeling. You learn through imitation. But that also takes rubbing shoulders with one another. And so life on life is so important. Dave Ferguson, again to reference him in Hero Maker, said that Jesus spent 73% of his time with the disciples in the Gospels. 73% of the Gospels is Jesus with his 12. That's a 3-to-1 ratio of Jesus with his 12 versus Jesus with the masses. And so what that tells us is that Jesus was intentionally trying to pull away from the masses so that he could invest in the 12. Because you and I cannot invest 500 people. We can influence 500 people, but we cannot impact 500 people. And we want impact, not influence. And so we need to share our lives. So a lot of these students are coming out of broken homes as well. I mean, the divorce rates, the abuse rates, it's frightening, honestly. And so when these students get in these homes of adult leaders, whether it be life groups or D groups, they're getting to see now what a godly person looks like, what a godly marriage looks like, and what a godly family looks like. They're getting to see the kid who just threw their shoe across the room and hit one of the students in life group now get disciplined in a godly manner. And they need to see that. They need to see this happening. Secondly, we need to share the word. And this is what you think it is. Teaching students how to do the spiritual practices and formation principles of reading the Bible, praying, evangelism, silence and solitude, and on and on and on we go. That these adults can teach these students how to do these things, because some of our adults know more about reading their Bibles and praying and so on more than we do, even though we are deemed the professionals. And so these adults can teach them the spiritual formation practices. There's accountability here of asking the hard questions. And the deeper the discipleship, the deeper the questions need to be. And so accountability needs to be done from all the way from, hey, did you read your Bible this week? To, hey, what did you watch on Netflix this week? Was it appropriate? Was it good? What did your hands touch this week that weren't good, right? Like, what did your mind think about? We need to have accountability. So we want to share our life. We want to share the word and grow in our holiness. But then next, we want to share the ministry. And we need to have a they is greater than me approach. And this comes out of Mark 1. You know, up until Mark 1:20, it is singular pronouns talking about Jesus. It says like Jesus went and did this, and then it says he did that, and he went about proclaiming that the gospel will come and that we need to repent and believe, and it's singular pronouns. And then in Mark 1:16 through 20, he calls the 12. And then I love what happens in Mark 21. Chapter 1, verse 21. It says, and they went into Capernaum. It's a small, subtle shift, but it's a major shift. It goes from Jesus to the disciples with Jesus. And Jesus says, now you're going to come with me, and I'm going to show you how to do this. He modeled for them how to live the Christian life. He shared the ministry. He would say one day, hey, go out to the 12 and to the 70, go out 2 by 2 and do this. He says, I'm giving you authority. And then in Matthew 28, he says, now all authority is mine. I've conquered sin, death, and hell. And now all authority is mine, and you have it right here with the Great Commission. Jesus shared the ministry with them. So let's share our life, let's share the word, and let's share the ministry. And let's talk about how. Number one, we need to create opportunities. A lot of us don't have adults, or maybe some of us, I should say, don't have adults in our ministry right now because we don't have the opportunities for them. There's not spaces for them. We need to create spaces. So think strategically. What's your vision? What is your church doing to reach and disciple college students? And how can these adults become involved? For us, it's them being life group leaders and T2s, which I'll talk about that more in a second. But create spaces. Maybe it's through host homes. It's through a freshman family. There's a lot of different things you can do to create opportunities. Secondly is to cast the vision and to go out and make the ask. This year, we switched to more adults being involved in our ministry by leading out in the life groups. And so we had over 40 adults in our ministry that I was wanting and needed to recruit in order to pull off the number of groups that I thought we needed this year. So over 40 people, and I'll be honest with you guys, I was really intimidated. It took a large part of my summer, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to need around 40 or over 40. I'm probably going to have to call about 100 people in our church to get that. I don't think I called more than 55 because the Lord's hand was in it. But what I learned is that these adults want to be as involved in these college students' lives as much as these college students want the adults in their life. They were itching to get involved in this college ministry. And I just hope in y'all's spheres and where you're at that you can go out and say, hey, I'm not asking you to do this. I'm inviting you to do this. I'm inviting you into what God is doing right now in our college ministry. Share with them the strategy and the beauty of college ministry. I tell them if years 1 through 5 are the most physically formidable years, 18 to 24 are the most spiritually formidable years in a lot of people's lives. Like, my faith became my own my sophomore year in college, or my junior year in college. And so, like, that is so true. And so build out a list and start making the ask. Get with your team and write out a number of names and start making the ask. If you don't know where to start, if your list is 3 people and you know you need more, go visit the senior adult ministry and what they're doing. Go to their bingo nights. Go to whatever they're doing that night or that week and hang out with them. Go to a life group this summer and spend time in that life group all year. I've also learned that young adults and empty nesters up to senior adults are some of our best leaders in our college ministry. It's usually the ones that are 30 to 40 with multiple kids and ball games all throughout the week. They're busy. It's hard. It's not a good season for them on Tuesday nights, but that's why they're involved on Sundays and Wednesdays. But young adults, empty nesters, senior adults, those have been great. We have a senior adult ministry, and they have the junior high and the senior high in the senior adult ministry. And junior high is the younger senior adults, and the senior high is the older single adults. And so the walkers and those people, they're probably not the ones we're calling on to be in college ministry, but the younger senior adults are really, really active and healthy and can do it, and they want to do it. And there's so much wisdom there. So go hang out with them.
What were you inviting them to do?
To be adult life group leaders. So I'm going to talk about that here in a second, actually. So it'll make more sense. But one thing I want to also share here is to make specific ask. Intentional ask, or I would say personal invitations are stronger than a broad announcement. Mm-hmm. And so don't depend on the stage to get this done. Go make the ask yourself. And then thirdly, cultivate the leaders. Train them and train them well. Teach them what you need them to know. For us, we did a training in the fall, in August. We did a mid-semester evaluation. And then we did an end-of-the-year celebration dinner with a survey at the end for us to get more feedback on how the year went. So train them and train them well. Cultivate the leaders. Develop them as leaders. They're pouring out. They need to be poured into. Again, it goes back to Ephesians 4. Don't worry about their students. Worry about them. And when you worry about them, they'll take care of their students well. Fourth, I would say communicate often. Just stay in touch with them, whether that's a monthly email with a resource or encouragement, it's a weekly text, it's a bi-weekly phone call, whatever it is for you, whatever what you can build into your capacity, communicate and communicate often. And then last but not least, celebrate often. Celebrate stories, Celebrate stories, because you will reproduce what you celebrate. And everything that you celebrate, whether it be from the stage, whether it be in intentional conversations, that is what you will reproduce. And so for us, we did an appreciation dinner a few weeks ago where we had our students who were led by these adults in our ministry come and serve them their dinner that night. Give them refills. I said, if they ask you to wipe their mouth, then you wipe their mouth that night, all right? Because they have served you all year, now you're going to serve them. And so they served them, and then throughout the night, we did 8 different testimonies where they just shared what God did through their leaders. And like the biggest burly men became little puppy dogs that night. And so it was just so powerful. And I'm going to share a story of that, even show you one here in a second. And so celebrate the stories. To get into what you were just asking about, this is what we do, okay? And so this is just a little look under the hood for us. This is our discipleship pipeline. And so we reach students. We want to plug them into the life group first and foremost. And so our life groups are in the homes of adult leaders. We have 10 life groups. We had 10 life groups this year with 4 adults. It'd be 2 married couples or 4 singles or however that shakes out. And they met throughout the week in the homes of these leaders. And so that's what we push our students to first and foremost. Freshmen, especially sophomores, even some juniors. And then for those who are ready for deeper discipleship, we use our life groups as breeding grounds for deeper discipleship in the D groups. And so D groups happen another time in the week where a D group leader, this is where our student leaders come into play. 26 this year, they will have 3 D group members in their D group this year. And so that's how our discipleship really happens. We really say our life groups are community spaces, and our D groups are discipleship spaces. And so where the T2 is a T2 comes from Titus 2, which I've just referenced to you guys earlier. It comes from that older men teach the younger men, older women teach the younger women, and we want our adults to lead our D groups. And so for every 3 D group leaders, they get 1 T2. So imagine this being one group right here, and they meet once a week, and then this group will meet again, meet once a week as well. And so our D group leaders are being discipled and making disciples. And then our life groups are spaces for anyone else to be a part of. But some of these people, some of these D group members will still want to be a part of a life group, and that's totally fine if they have the margin for it. But if they don't, it's totally okay because they're getting discipled because our D groups, we want multiplication. And so that's how we have adults involved. Right here, 40 adults leading these life groups. And then last year, it was about 7 pretty much lifelong disciple makers, in our church, making disciples out of our D groups right here. I hope that maybe answers a little bit of what it looked like.
Do you have any student leadership over your life groups?
This year we
A student or two that kind of take the leadership.
We did last year, but we're tweaking some things for some reasons. Like last year, we had these guys get in all the groups, the life groups, and kind of serve as student leaders underneath. But it just got really tiered and it got really structured to where they were in a D group, and then they were going to life group, and then it became a lot. And so what we're doing this year, we're going to have our life groups again. But we're going to have a strategy built out for them to naturally and organically call out students in the group because our life groups look like 60% large group discussion and then 40% small group discussion. And so our hope is that as students come and they say, you know what, this person's really good, they could lead a small group, that more small groups would form in the life group throughout the year. And that would give them some student leadership. And then we're going to say, hey, who were your student leaders in your group? Who ended up leading small group discussions? Because those are the guys and girls that either need to be in a D group or start being a D group leader. And so that's kind of how we funnel. Yeah.
Just to clarify, so your T2 is the adult leader and everything below those next 2 layers are all students.
Yes. And yes, right here. These are all students. But then, of course, going back to this, the life groups are led by adults. And so, yeah. I'll give you time to ask more questions too about our processes, but I want to hear from you guys as well. We got about 10 minutes left, but I want to tell some stories. And so I would rather you watch a video than me share or than me try to tell you this video. So this is Sarah Alexis. She was a student in our ministry. She actually was one of our interns last year. She's going through the IMB Journeyman pipeline right now. So she is at IMB getting trained. And so she sent this letter to her discipleship leader, Stephanie, but she couldn't be there, of course, because she's getting ready to go be sent out here in just a few weeks. And so this was the video she sent to talk about the impact Steph had in her life.
Hi guys, it's Sarah Alexis. I just wanted to hop on here really quickly and talk about one of the most important people in my life, and that is Stephanie Epps. If you know anything about the last 12 months of my life, you probably know that the word that I would use to describe it is uncertain. As I've looked at being on the field, there have been a lot of questions, whether it be realistic things like how am I going to pay not having a full-time job or food or all those things, but also looking towards the field. What am I going to be doing? Where am I going to go? What is this going to look like? And even if I can really do this. And in all of that uncertainty, other than the Lord and the Word, one thing has really remained constant, and that has been Steph and her family for me. Steph has set the example of true discipleship in my life. And as I've been at training for the last few weeks, not only has she come up weekly for me, she comes up daily for different reasons, whether talking about her willingness to provide a meal when I haven't known if I could buy one, her offering me living on the couch with Kelsey when I didn't know if I could afford rent, her giving me free access to her babies at all times, because she knows how important that is to me, and just inviting me into her home and her family and her life. Discipleship with Steph has looked like not only accountability for sin, time in the Word, prayer, but it has been life on life, just as Paul talks about all throughout the New Testament. And as I've looked for the last few weeks towards moving on, towards being on the field for the next 2 years, at being in North Africa with Muslims, that is the example for me that I want to take forward. Paul and Timothy, but Steph and Sarah Alexis as well. And so thank you so much, Steph, for loving me, for holding me as I've grieved and cried, for cheering me on as I've picked teams and been encouraged, for praying over me constantly, for words of encouragement, for meals, for all of the things. You and Corey have been such an example to me of what a biblical marriage should look like. And the way that you raised Macy and Coleman has been such an example of a family that I hope to have someday. And so thank you for loving me, for discipling me, and for encouraging me that even though things are great here, that has to be replicated elsewhere so that the gospel can be fulfilled and that the Lord can come back. So for all the other life group leaders and T2s, I just encourage you to continue in doing that. Not only discipling in the commands, but also discipling in love and doing life together. That's what I would talk about for the rest of my life. The people like Steph that have done life with me and shared the good news with me. And I hope to do that for the rest of my life. And I hope that other students can do that because of your faithfulness. So I love you, Steph. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, so you can probably imagine Steph didn't see that one coming, and so she was like a puddle of tears when she saw this video. I mean, she hadn't seen her in a couple months. She's been gone for I think 6-7 weeks right now, and so I'm excited to get to see her here this Saturday. She's coming back for about a week, and then she's heading out for 2 years, and so. I'll show you a few more, tell you a few more quick stories. So these are some of our great adult leaders. Can you find the adult leaders in the picture? So this is Mr. Rex and this is Miss Barb. Miss Barb is just awesome. She's this feisty, high energy lady, and Rex is this quiet strength of a man. And so they have been some of our great adult leaders. Our students love them. They went to their graduation. They cried when life group ended. It's just been awesome. These two got baptized that night, and so they came out to their baptisms and just got to be a part of that. The only pictures I have are baptisms, but there's been so many. This is Landon and Hannah Woody, and what I love about this picture is how they've gravitated to the kids. They're kind of like on the outside, and it's like, we're here for the kids too. And so, again, Bree here got baptized, and so their kids came, and so they just got to love their families this year, and their families got to learn to love them. And so these pictures speak 1,000 words right here on just why you need adults in your ministry. But hey, I would love to move into a time. We have about 5 minutes. I would love to answer more questions. And if we have some more time, talk through good practices that you have found helpful in your college ministries or young adult ministries. But yeah, any questions? Yeah.
First off, that was just so encouraging hearing all those stories. The thing that our ministry is trying to focus on in the next semester is making it less cliquey. We're a pretty large church, and so we're trying to address the clickiness, but also we want to prioritize those deep, rich, intentional relationships within these groups as well. And so what does that dynamic look like for you guys as you're prioritizing these life groups with adults inside? Does it ever feel cliquey from group to group at these larger events, or is it more natural?
Yeah, I would say it is cliquey, but it's a good cliquey. Like, I think it's great when students walk in and they naturally navigate to or gravitate toward the students that they know. And their arms are around each other and they're joking and stuff. Where it's not good, of course, is when you have new students. And so that may be another breakout for another day of how do you, integrate new students into your ministry. But I mean, they do run deep with these. Are you asking maybe for solutions on how to prevent that too? Yeah. Man, for us, like our life groups, our students, they meet on different nights, and so a lot of their life groups are determined by availability. Like I can't go on Monday, so I'll go on Tuesday. But maybe some ideas could be even to get them out serving together, like or maybe doing joint life groups or joint social events. You know, each month our life groups do a hangout. And so maybe for groups, you could say, hey, I want you two groups to do this together, you know, tonight. Maybe pair them up as it for a change or something, just some ideas. I don't know your context. That we're a larger church too. And so cliques are inevitable, I think, sometimes. But they're not bad, but they can be. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long did it take you guys to get from like your first iteration of this to where you are now?
Yeah, so 3 years, honestly. Like we diagnosed some issues in our first year. Second year, we did more tear sheets than you could ever imagine, and like just tore up our ministry and threw it up on their board. And then this year, we implemented it. And so it took time to get to this new model of life groups. Used to, our students led the life groups, but that's what it just it wasn't working. Like we would take attendance, and it's like, hey, why didn't you meet 2 weeks in a row? I just A-State had a basketball game. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like just different things, and so it took time to think through.
What were some of the roadblocks to that? Like, because there are some benefits to the student.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But there are some crazy things. Like this semester, I found out that one of our groups had moved from a family's home to another family's home, and that other family went to a church across town.
Oh, man.
So one of my groups was meeting, and I never talked to the leaders, and it was some of that. It was not one problem, like meeting in a different church's home. That's okay, but I had no idea it happened. And there's a lot of that stuff, but I don't know. How do you make that transition, and what do you lose?
Yeah, man, we did it slow. I got our leadership on board. This is good for any leadership. I made sure me and our full-time director were on the same page, because if we're not on the same page, nothing else is going to be on the same page. I let our interns work on all this stuff with us, and so they got to speak into it. And some of them left, and we got new interns, and then they would speak into it. And they were on board, and then we met with all of our student leaders and explained to them the process, let them speak into it. We made a few more tweaks, and then from there, we did a vision night in our ministry and said, hey, this is where we're going. And students seem to gravitate to it. Listen, anytime you make a change, there's going to be people who don't like it. It's usually a silent minority, a silent majority. You have a few outspoken individuals, eat the fish, spit out the bones. Pay attention to who's talking to you about it. You know, is it the same person that complains about everything? But lead through vision. And if you lead through vision and you communicate clearly and often, we made the change. And our students, some of them inwardly all year, they were like, yeah, we didn't really know about it. And they didn't maybe verbally express that, but they would say it at the celebration dinner. They were like, yeah, we didn't really know what this year is going to look like. And they're like, but this has been the best thing ever. Cool. And so just lead through the change. Be the leader that God's called you to be through that. I could probably share a lot more, but slow is not bad in terms of implementing change sometimes.
Are the adults in the small group the whole time? Like they're not just like they literally lead the small group.
They lead the large group, and then they break down and begin to lead small groups in that as well. Yeah.
Is the small group, because I noticed those were all co-ed, and so like when I think of our student base, those are usually just guys and gals.
Yeah.
But like the rest of the church, like more of like the married couples and the multi-generational, those are all co-ed.
Yeah.
Only college is separated by guys.
This is the first time we've done co-ed too, and so that was a thing that we were like, how's this gonna go when so-and-so confesses this sin? And everyone's like, whoa, I didn't see that one coming. So small group, we keep the questions general but good, and then we get more specific, and our small groups are gender-based.
Okay.
That way they're confessional questions more times than not.
And that's just a set aside time during your life.
Yeah. Our life group model typically looks like opening discussion, context of passage, read passage, pray, 5 questions, general large group discussion, 60 to 70% of the group, and then 30 to 40% of the group is the small group at the end.
Which I love because really other than youth and college, it will be co-ed.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's life.
Yeah. And so some of our students didn't love co-ed, but that was also because a lot of them that didn't love it this year were the girls who were leading in the group, and they're like, I just kind of feel weird, like, not to get into like women's roles in ministry, but they're like, what about like, should I teach? Like I'm teaching another man, and we're like, well, you're not teaching, you're literally asking a question. Like you're facilitating discussion, and there's a difference there. And so some of that was weird for some of our students, but with our adults being the main facilitators of group next year, that's going to solve a lot of the problems and stuff too. Yeah. So I saw a hand go up over here.
No, I was just going to say I host our girls only, and we do most of ours. The majority of ours are co-ed. I mean, only girls, and we have seen some of the young ladies that have trauma or anxiety.
Yes.
Societal things that it just makes it really difficult. It's been a healthy to get them on board and coming. And
that's good.
Just being able to pour into them.
Yeah, we've toyed around with I love your insight there, because that's not something I maybe have slowed down enough myself and thought about. We've toyed around with like, should we have 1 or 2 groups that are just gender based, and then the other 8, be co-ed? And so those are things we're even like processing through right now as we get into next year. But yeah, good insight.
Our groups, just as I don't know if it helps, but it's the adults lead all of them, but mine, I came into it kind of in the middle of a semester, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this well. And I had a student leader in mine, and we've continued that way. So just from what you've said, like, what do you feel is a difference in what your students that were student leading versus the adult leading? Like, what did you see? Like, what was the biggest?
I think greater focus in the group. Students don't do the best of staying on track sometimes. Honestly, just what are they saying theologically? Like we had one group where the guy was trying to teach the others how to speak in tongues. And we were like, bro, we are not Pentecostal, all right? We are Baptist. And like, why didn't you stop that? He's like, I just didn't know. It's like, no, like you got to step in and like, so like that ain't happening now with those groups. Like, I'm not kidding. I'm not making that up either. And so, yeah, those focus, I think, biblical wisdom, good, just trusted advice that adults are able to lead. But listen, we also have those students like this year they were stepping out, and so like we let the adults even like hand ownership over as the year went on to the group. That's why we're still going to integrate some student leadership in the life group, but not to the degree that it was last year, because we gave too much to the students. They felt burdened by the time. Yeah, they felt burdened.
Thank you.
How often are you? Sorry. How often do you meet with the adults?
Yeah, our adults, we're 1, 2, probably quarterly, 4 times throughout the year. And then, man, I didn't say this in this breakout, because after you teach the same breakout twice, you forget what you said or have said. But like, man, I touch base with them in the halls of church. Like, I'm out in the lobbies just looking for them.
So you don't do a Sunday morning thing for your college students?
Like, what do you mean by that?
Class or gathering?
We do a class called Theology of the Gospel, and it's a leadership class that we require. So yeah, it's not anything for like our adults or students. Like we do that 1 hour at 9:30, but our church has 3 services, and so there's plenty of time before and after for me to visit. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, stole my question. So what does care for your D group leaders look like then?
Yeah.
Because they're college kids.
They are, yeah, they are.
Checking in on them.
We have leadership summits this first year, because we switched to them being the D group leaders. We met with every single one of them after a month of group starting. We sat them down and talked to them and asked them questions and just made sure they were okay. Of course, staying in touch with them, but mainly if I can just stay in touch with the 7 to 9 T2s, they're keeping in touch with them. You know what I mean? And so the T2s know what their students are doing. And so if I can just care for the few, they'll care for the many. And so that's one thing. But then also we do leadership summits in our college ministry. So twice a month, one in September and then one in November, one in January, one in March. We do discipleship training, very intentional, practical discipleship tools that they'll walk away with. And so that's another way we stay in touch. We'll do roundtable discussion before or after. Hey, what's good? What's not? How can we help? And so on. Guys, I've held you up longer than I should have, so I'm going to let you guys go, but I'm going to hang around. If you have more questions, just feel free to come up here, and I'd love to chat some more. Here's my contact information right there. And so, guys, I just want to encourage you to take the next step, too. Before you leave Roundup, find someone else who's doing college ministry or adult-led ministry in college well, and get in a piece of advice. Get a practical step that you can take. It's easy to come to these things, learn a lot, and not do anything with it. So find someone else who's doing it well and go home with a practical step of how you can leverage adults to make disciples. So thank y'all for coming. Yeah.